exploring the culture, the adventure, and the impact of martial arts. That's what we do at Kung Fu Podcast. And I'm your host, Sifu T.W. Smith. Thank you so much for joining me today. And in this particular episode, we're going to be looking at the differences and similarities between two of the most iconic cities in Chinese martial arts, the Chen Village and the home of the Shaolin Temple. In all honesty, we're probably not going to get to both of them in this episode, but it is the goal to cover them both as if it was one. In the beginning, I want to recognize someone who took a few moments and left me a review over in iTunes. And just as a reminder, I go through, there's, I believe, 6 different iTunes stores around the world. And I go to every one of them. So if you're listening to me on iTunes, then please go over there and leave a review. I can promise you, I go over there about once or twice a month and pluck off whatever reviews have been there. And I try to share them back and I try to learn from them as well. This listener, his name is Rob, and he titled his review, A Diamond in the Rough. And he says, I've listened to several of Sifu Smith's podcasts, and only recently did it occur to me to give both him and the podcast 5 well-deserved stars. Sifu Smith, mea culpa for that oversight. He continues by saying, of the few martial arts podcasts that I listen to on a regular basis, I really appreciate the careful attention to historical accuracy as well as the obvious large amount of research that he puts into each episode. This dedication to quality content makes Kung Fu podcasts really stand out, and I really enjoy and learn from the historical information that he provides. Well done, and I look forward to many, many more episodes. Well, Rob, I don't know how long you've been listening, but let me tell you, I really appreciate you taking the time to leave me that review. And if you enjoy this program, you can leave a review on any of the platforms you are listening to me at. Or you know what? You can go to kungfupodcast.com/support, and I have a list of things there that helps me run this program and keeps it going. Or if nothing else, tell a friend. It all helps. If this is your first time to Kung Fu Podcast, welcome. I believe that you're going to find the information I provide is educational, sometimes entertaining, and I hope I can continue to meet that high level of quality content that makes you, the listeners, come back, because it is very important to me to do my very best, because I know that the audience of this program is some of the finest and sharpest martial artists in the world, people that take a genuine interest and care about their craft. In this episode, number 125, we're going to be doing a little drop back where we had done a review in episodes number 118, 119, 120, and 121 on Tai Chi Chuan and the search for the little old Chinese man. And this particular episode is going to pick up in those areas, but where we had left off in reviewing the differences between the Chen Village and the home of the Shaolin Temple. How have they changed through the course of time? One of the things I wanted to remind you of is that as we explored in those episodes, we learned that the city engineers and government officials purposely designed parks for Tai Chi. So they were designing these places as part of living, ever-changing sculptures that were going to be part of the icon and the landscape of places like Shanghai. And in many ways, that is fantastic because it promotes and encourages a healthy and active lifestyle. But on the other side, we also become aware that it can also digress into other areas besides a healthy way of living. One of the things that occurred to me is that as I'm following Chinese, Japanese, maybe Taiwanese RSS feeds, a lot of times what I will see is what is a very well orchestrated symbol of something like Tai Chi. For example, in the People's Daily of China, they reported in a tweet, learners practice Tai Chi in central China's Henan, where 40 Tai Chi training centers attracted 10,000 Tai Chi fans in 2016. and they have this massive yin and yang symbol, and people are circled all around it, and it's extremely well done. It's a massive yin and yang that's made by people. And it occurred to me through, like, for example, Professor Adam Frank's dissertation in his novel, that a lot of times they were not always volunteers who were attracted to these big events. These were people who were compelled to get out there, practice, and be part of the landscape to carry out the culture as well as being part of the symbolic sculpture that they want to present to the world. As we're getting ready to move over into the meat of the program, the backbone of the whole thing is going to be based off the book review by Dr. Ben Judkins. And if you ever want to find his work, go to kungfupodcast.com/Ben. So let's get yourself ready, get settled in. If we're going for a drive, make sure you got your seatbelt on. Or if we're going for a walk, let's make sure that we're all good. And let's get going. In the novel, Tai Chi Chuan and the Search for the Little Old Chinese Man, Chapter 5 is titled, Through Martial Arts, We Will Become Friends. Tai Chi Chuan is a master symbol of modernity. Professor Adam Frank is going to take us on a road trip, and it's going to be in the late 1980s to mid-1990s. And like on any road trip, what is an adventure without stops along the way? Here we are in China, and we are interested in this intersection of the martial arts and what we call our identity. We're going to first visit the Chen Village, where Tai Chi Chuan was created, and then later, we're going to drop in on an exuberant festival celebrating the iconic Shaolin Temple with floor shows, fireworks, and a wushu tournament. As a backdrop to the Chen Village and to the Tai Chi Chuan style, the recognized creator, Chen Wangting, lived from 1580 to 1660. He was a Ming Dynasty general who founded Tai Chi Chuan, and this martial art gave rise to all of the popular styles that we know today. A really good book on this topic was written by David Gaffney, titled Essence of Tai Chi Chuan. You can find it over the Kung Fu Podcast Die Hard library, and David and I have recently corresponded, and he's authorized me to create the audio version of the book, and that is something I'm really looking forward to. Well, one of the most remarkable aspects of this journey is the strongly contrasting images of the Chen Village and the Shaolin Temple during the time that we're going to be there. The Shaolin Temple is located in Dingfeng, and in some respects, it's a puzzle that there should be so much contrast between these two communities. On a structural level, they are very similarly situated within Chinese society. Now, it's true that the Chen Village is a small, primarily agricultural town, whereas Dingfeng is a medium-sized industrial city. But both communities are located in the same rural, economically depressed geographic area. Both have seen some development, much of which has come through political patronage in the last decades, but have largely missed out on the economic miracle that has transformed the life in cities like Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou. Each of these communities is home to one of China's iconic martial traditions, and in the current era, both places are dependent on martial pilgrims, tourists, and curiosity seekers who come by the busload. It would be totally understandable because anyone could easily be forgiven for thinking that the two communities would be the same, except perhaps in the matter of scale. Yet these two places are actually very different. They both have a number of martial arts teachers, wushu boarding schools, and tournaments. But in both economic and social terms, their development has followed different tracks. Professor Frank's discussion of these communities is interesting, precisely because he manages to so accurately capture the feel of both places. Of course, it would be possible to write an entire volume on either of these cities, such as the one Matthew Polly famously did for Shaolin. Though the Chen Village may still be waiting its biographer a record, but we might have that taken care of with David Gaffney's book. Now, if you're not familiar with Matthew Polly, he is an American author who in 2007 published his memoir, The American Shaolin. And then in 2011, he published the book Tapped Out, which was about the 2 years he spent training to become a mixed martial artist. Well, Professor Frank is going to confine his discussion of both these places to a single chapter. That ensures that he will only be able to offer us just a sketch of each community. Yet once again, his ability to capture the essence through character sketches is very revealing. At the time of this review, the Chen Village has enjoyed less government-sponsored growth and fewer building projects. It remains a popular destination for tourists, and these individuals are often a little more knowledgeable and seem to value a different sort of experience than the busloads of day trippers who clog the courtyards of the Shaolin Temple. Furthermore, the Chen Village, and for that matter the Chen clan, seem to have done a better job at retaining an authentic sense of their community. So as a quick review, we know that the Chen Village has received less government support, and that's going to come up again here later in this episode, and the fact that these two places are very close to one another, and they would be considered close even before motor passenger vehicles, because that didn't come around till much, much later. The 35-mile distance would take a good day and a half to ride on horseback, since a regular horse can usually travel around 30 miles per day. And unless you're going to ride all through the darkness, which we would not have recommended in the 17th century in China, or perhaps any other time to be riding at night, it would take you a couple of days to get there. But that would be considered pretty close. A great description of it comes from Professor Mayur Shahar, who we have talked about before here on this program, and his book on the Shaolin Monastery is a must-have. I know that it's available in audiobook, ebook, Amazon. It's in many different formats, and it is a book I would highly recommend that you put in your library. Professor Shahar writes, quote, Chen Wanting created his bare-handed style in the vicinity of the Shaolin Monastery. His native, Qinjingao Village, was located approximately 35 miles north of the temple. Moreover, he laid the foundations of Tai Chi Chuan during the very same period, the 17th century, when the Shaolin monks were turning their attention to hand combat. It should not come as a surprise, therefore, that his Tai Chi Chuan shared common traits, such as an emphasis upon close-range hand combat with Shaolin Chuan. The term Tai Chi figures in Shaolin's hand combat classic, just as the monastery's legend of the staff-wielding Vajrapani found its way into the Chen family's military writings. Matsuda Ryuichi writes, most people believe that Tai Chi Chuan and Shaolin Chuan are completely different forms of hand combat. Actually, in their basic postures, hand methods, leg methods, and other fighting aspects, the two styles are entirely alike. He goes on to say that Tai Chi Chuan was not the only bare-handed style that emerged at the Shaolin Monastery's vicinity. Beginning in the 17th century and all through the Qing period, Henan was a hotbed for martial arts. Along the Yellow River Basin from Shanxi through Henan to Shandong, numerous fighting styles emerged, many of them in the context of sectarian rebellion. Now, of course, Professor Har's book continues, but that gives us a backdrop of how closely related these two places really are. In fact, not only in vicinity, but in so close that they were actually sharing martial arts styles, and by many of the people who study and research, there was a lot more commonality between the Shaolin and the Tai Chi Chuan martial arts when they were actually both martial arts, and one didn't become a wushu sport and the other one didn't become just a form of physical education. But as the martial components of them existed at the time, they were both very well related. Ben continues that the Chen Village is clearly not the same community that existed in 1900 or even in 1970. In the past, Tai Chi did not dominate the local landscape to the extent that it does today. Yet that is one of the things that makes it such an interesting test case. One can clearly see the impact of a subtle change in how, quote, traditional Chinese culture, end quote, is understood on a still intact community. So what are you going to see at the Chen Village? Well, family temples that charge admittance only to outsiders. Displays bought with money from overseas students. New schools where country youth study the martial arts full-time, hoping to become a boxing instructor or more likely a security guard or police officer. Now, is this the authentic Kung Fu? Or even perhaps, to use another phrase, it is a representation of a martial world that never really existed? This is certainly a difficult question. We know what conditions were like in the village during the early 20th century as Tong Hao, which we talked about a lot in Kung Fu Podcast number 34, who was the pioneer martial arts historian, he went there and he visited it, and he documented what he found in some of the first high-quality publications in the field of Chinese martial studies. There can be no doubt that what modern martial pilgrims encounter is very different, both in the terms of forms and substance, from what they might have seen in the past. Yet and still, we can't shake the feeling that much of what happens at Chen Village is fundamentally real. The nature of Tai Chi has been transformed, as well as its place in Chinese society. Yet the children of the village still study boxing as a means of getting ahead in a rapidly changing world. Place and clan are still central building blocks of local identity. Now I'm going to put a bookmark in Ben's review there. In Frank's dissertation, where he had arrived and he was visiting, and we're talking about the late 1980s, early 1990s, when he arrived and started going around to some of the buildings, he wrote, quote, "This hall sports a well-equipped gym with heavy punching bags and apparently high-quality protective equipment. It is in this room that the Chen stylists practice boxing as part of their training. Chen stylists have a reputation in China for being formidable fighters." Frank writes that the village has about 3,000 people, and of course that's not going to make it sound like a big metropolis or anything. And in fact, when he went there, you had the big harvests, and chickens were some of the first things you would see as you would come into the village. And then he wrote, "It benefits directly from martial arts tourism and from the operation of martial arts schools. It is clear that Chen Chigao has emerged in the last 20 years as a key component in this party's requisition of Tai Chi Chuan as a master symbol at both the local and the national level. But the relationship between party and village is apparently a highly symbiotic one. This development has occurred directly because of national encouragement of foreign participation in a small local economy. The collusion from the village level all the way up through national sports bureaucracy creates a space for Tai Chi Chuan, and is inscribed by all the twists and turns of Chinese history to inscribe itself on the national mind." Franks continues by saying the contradiction lies in the fact that Chen style, a family-based form that is actually still widely taught by family members, is also an extremely popular style in forms competition, and therefore has undergone a certain amount of standardization in wushu academies and in the martial arts. As you read further along, he writes that in the martial style, it's unlike in the competitive form style like the government-approved Yang 24 or 48 styles, and that the martial practitioners valued the preservation of the forms, but status is gained in Chen style through a combination of good form, fighting ability, and attention to Wu Dai, the martial virtues. Well, as we move from the 1980s to 1990s, at ChenStyleTaiChiChuan.net, they wrote that Wenshun County, the place where the Chen Village exists, has officially been recognized as the birthplace of Tai Chi Chuan by the Chinese government in 2007. They say that the village still maintains its traditional character, but it's changing fast as the school of Tai Chi Chuan there gains reputation and more people from China and abroad are visiting and or spending time there to train in Tai Chi Chuan. So whatever tourism and economy being generated by the village, for example, what Frank had reported earlier, and he did in great detail in his dissertation, where, for example, to enter a small room, visitors had to buy a ticket, and that there is a shrine there in the place where young Lu Chan reportedly kept peeking over the fence where he began learning the Tai Chi Chuan. And in fact, during Frank's visit, he says that the Chen Village appears on the surface to have coped very well with the many challenges that face small tourist destinations in China. It benefits directly from martial arts tourism and from the operations of martial arts school. So as we're looking through this time span from the 1980s, 1990s, early 2000s, the upgrades that's happening around the Chen Village and comparing them to the farm-like descriptions that you'll get in Frank's dissertation, and compared to what we would find in an article written on November 21st, 2015 by the EuropeanChinaDaily.com. And this article is titled, Tai Chi Changes the Face of Quaint, Quiet Farming Village. It says that the birthplace of the popular martial art strives to preserve its traditional character while embracing newfound prosperity and the challenges of growth. Once hidden along the dusty rural backroads of Winshen County in Henan Province, the village of Qinjigao, the birthplace of the martial art of Tai Chi Chuan, now stands tall among carefully tended corn and wheat fields. Familiar to Tai Chi enthusiasts simply as the Chen Village, Qinjigao has undergone and continues to experience huge changes that are transforming the countryside surrounding this 600-year-old village in central China. They report in this place of almost 3,000 people that there's a new hotel and a few storefronts have come up. A museum has been recently built, and it can be seen from a distance as you're approaching the village, where before there were just tall, lanky trees that lined the roadsides. There's a new training hall and competition arena that greets the visitors. There's even talk of building a hospital and a Tai Chi university, and as well creating a lake that would be fed in part by the nurturing waters of the nearby Yellow River. All right, so let's all take a breath, because that sounds like a major overhaul. And with all these changes going on, in my mind, I ask, well, what would be the point of going? Now I'm at the point where Ben was when he stated earlier something along the lines of, is this just an illusion of a martial art that never existed? Well, the deputy chief of Winshen County explains why I may still want to go, because even though with all these upgrades they're talking about, the heart of the village is being monitored by the government to stay close to the same. They write, yet amid these great winds of change, the heart of the old village, like the calm eye of a hurricane, sits untouched by the passing time. The village has a bright future once more infrastructure is built, says Zhang Chin-tai, deputy chief of Winshen County. Construction is already underway or completed on tour bus stations, parking lots, and hotels. And the county has designated about 35 square kilometers, or 22 square miles, in and around the village as a Tai Chi cultural zone. But the county government is also keen on safeguarding the heart of the village. He says that we must preserve the old village, the old houses of important people. While their vision and experiences differ, top Chen family Tai Chi masters and local officials who talk to China Daily agree on one point. The further development of Chen Tai Chi and the village where it was born will depend on cooperation and coordination among the many stakeholders in Qinjigao's future. These include the villagers, the traditional Chen Family Council, planners, the local and regional tourism industry, different levels of government, and in particular, the 19th generation villagers known worldwide to Tai Chi enthusiasts as the Four Tigers of Chen Village. All right, so the business model here is to keep the heart, the village itself, preserved, but to change the face, the 22 square miles or 35 kilometers surrounding the village, by officially tagging it to be a cultural zone. And here shortly you're going to hear the seeds of change and the when and where these seeds begin to sprout. The article continues by saying, Qinzhigao at one time was a village of great hardship, poverty, and struggle. Its fortune began changing in the early 1980s. Now remember, this was about 5 to 8 years before Professor Frank got there. And this was when a group of Japanese visitors was so impressed by the village's traditional Tai Chi Chuan that was created in the 1600s by Chen Ting that they went home and began spreading the word about this little-known place. The small village then became famous very quickly. This aroused the government's attention, and in the past 10 years, Qinzhigao has developed the fastest. Private investors are lining up to assist with carrying out development plans for the village. They continue by saying that Tai Chi Grandmaster Chen remembers what the village was like just before its rise to fame. He says, quote, before 1981, this area was tombs and farmlands, but mostly it was vacant land. There's really been a lot of change. In 1981, I built the Tai Chi school with the help of the local government. And in 2000, I rebuilt it myself. It now covers just shy of 10,000 square meters, which is about 33,000 square feet. And it has about 80 dorm rooms with toilets and showers, features that make them popular among visitors, as well as dorm rooms for local students. That's a real good article written by James Healy at ChinaDaily.com, and I'll have a link for it over on the webpage. And the last thing I want to mention here about the Chen Village that just occurred March 27th, 2017. It says here that the Tai Chi was pitched for the UNESCO list. Now, the UNESCO list is the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. Apparently, the Chinese government is trying to get this community on the United Nations list to help keep the culture protected. And they're trying to move this along because South Korea and Japan are also making similar nominations. So what do we learn about the Chen Village? We know that when Tong Hao went there in the 1930s and recorded what he saw as a martial arts historian, it was quite a different view than Adam Frank had when he went in the 1980s. The Chen Village was just beginning to really rely on tourism and visitors as part of their economy. In 2007, the Chinese government formally recognizes the Chen Village culture and the birthplace of Tai Chi Chuan, and they try to get it on the UNESCO list, but it fails at that time, and now it's going up again, and it looks like it's going to go through. And they have already begun by creating a face around the village, trying to keep the heart of it intact, yet this cultural zone will be a home of museums, training halls, hotels, and much, much more. But as we bring this episode to a close, what you're going to hear about the story of the birthplace of Shaolin will be much, much different. Exploring the culture, the adventure, and the impact of martial arts. Thank you so much for joining me today, where we took a little time and looked at the Chen Village, going pretty much all the way back to the early 1930s. We jumped up into the 1980s, then the early 2000s, and got us all the way up to just less than a month ago. How has this place of less than about 3,000 people evolved through the course of time? How has the martial arts impacted their lives? How has their culture changed or evolved because of the experiences that they've had and having because of all the new people who are coming through? Take care of yourself, Have a great practice, and I'll be talking with you soon.